Hey, it's Sam from Sugar Spun Run, and today I'm showing you how to make a cannoli cake. Today's recipe is inspired by one of my personal favorite Italian desserts, the cannoli. I do have a classic cannoli recipe over on the blog. I've shared a video before, but today we are turning it into a cake, and I think you're going to love it. So before we begin, the first thing that we are going to need for today's recipe is 16 ounces of whole milk ricotta. I want to talk about this first because we are going to be straining this ricotta. You should really strain it overnight for best results because this is going to be one of the key ingredients in our frosting. And that's what really makes the cake taste like a cannoli. So let me show you how to strain this real quickly. I have 2 sheets of cheesecloth here. Before I talk about the cheesecake, actually, I have a bowl, I have a fine mesh strainer, and this is what I'm going to use to strain the ricotta. You want to make sure that the strainer is not touching the bottom of the bowl, otherwise your ricotta will be sitting in its own liquid and not draining. So then I'm going to take one piece of cheesecloth, place it that way, take another one, place it this way, so we're doubling up. Let's drop our ricotta right in the middle there. I'm going to press it down a bit, and then we'll wrap this cheesecloth over the ricotta. Then you're going to need something heavy to weigh down the ricotta. I like to use a 28-ounce can of tomatoes, and also use a little bit of foil because otherwise my label gets all wet from the ricotta, and I don't want that in my pantry. So I'll press down firmly. And ideally, this ricotta cheese should sit overnight in the refrigerator. I'm going to put it in the fridge. That way it's lost all of its liquid and we can make our frosting without having to worry about it being too soft or too runny. With that out of the way, let's start preparing our cake layers. The first thing you'll want to do is preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'm going to be preparing this batter in a large mixing bowl. I will be using my electric mixer today, but you could use your stand mixer with a paddle attachment instead if you prefer. I'm just going to go with this one today. All right, now in our mixing bowl, we are going to combine 2 2/3 cups of all-purpose flour with 1.5 cups of granulated sugar, didn't mean to do that, and a 1/2 cup of light brown sugar, which really adds a nice depth of flavor, richness, a little bit of moisture to these cake layers. The cake layers themselves are not so much cannoli flavored. Think of them as like the shells of your cannoli. They're a little bit more neutral. This cake is still going to taste amazing, but it's the frosting that's really going to bring everything together and make you say, wow, this tastes like a cannoli. We'll also be adding a teaspoon of baking powder and a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. I think I mixed up those dishes, but ultimately the right amount ended up in there. We'll also add 1 teaspoon of table salt. All right, go ahead and stir these ingredients together. Try to break up any lumps from the brown sugar while you're doing this. Right, and here's where our electric mixer comes in because we're about to start adding our butter. So we're using the reverse creaming method for this, which means instead of creaming together our butter and sugar, we're going to be mixing all of our dry ingredients and sugar together and then gradually adding the butter. You will need 12 tablespoons of butter, so I won't be using both of these sticks. I will just be using 1.5 sticks. And you want the butter to be softened. And what we will do is we are going to add 1 tablespoon of butter at a time. There's my first one. And then I am going to use my mixer to stir this in until it's completely combined into the dry ingredients. Once that's completely combined, I'll take another tablespoon, approximate tablespoon, and I will stir that one in. And I will keep doing this until I've added all 12 tablespoons of butter, and I don't want to add the next tablespoon of butter until the previous one is completely combined and broken up. Now when you're done, you're going to have a dry, sort of sandy looking mixture. I'll show you what that looks like. This method does take a little bit of time and a little bit of patience, but I do like the resulting crumb that you get. It's like a tighter, slightly more dense crumb, but it's still very moist. It's also a lot more difficult to accidentally overmix this cake batter when you are reverse creaming it. Our last tablespoon of butter, which doesn't want to combine. So here's that dry, sandy mixture I was telling you about. This is how yours should look at this point. It's pretty uniform, it's just really crumbly. So let's slide this out of the way. And in a large measuring cup, you're going to want to measure out 1.5 cups of buttermilk. You can use my buttermilk substitute in a pinch for this recipe, but I really do like using the real thing instead. It just kind of gives the cake a better depth of flavor, makes it a little bit more moist. So that's my recommendation. Ideally, you should be using room temperature buttermilk and room temperature eggs. We'll be adding 2 of these right in with our buttermilk. 1, 2. We'll add a tablespoon of vanilla extract. Just whisk everything together. You want to get those egg yolks nicely broken up and have a pretty uniform mixture before we proceed. All right, once we're feeling good about that, we'll bring back the rest of our ingredients. And with my mixer on low speed, I'm just going to gradually stir in the buttermilk. The buttermilk mixture, I should say. Should be done with these beaters now. So let's take a look at our batter. One thing we want to do is scrape the sides and bottom because we don't want there to be any lumps hiding, any dry batter hiding. We want a nice, smooth, uniform batter at this point. And this is looking pretty darn good. All right, so we're about ready to bake this. First, let's talk really quickly about your cake pans. You'll be using 3 8-inch cake pans for today's recipe, and you will want to grease and flour them. I use butter to grease my pans now. I've been doing that recently. It has been working just as well as Crisco when I'm making layer cakes like this. So I'll grease the pan, flour it, shake out any excess flour, and then I talk about this all the time, but cut out a round of parchment paper, put that on the bottom of your cake pan. That is going to ensure that your cakes don't stick. Always saves a lot of stress. So you'll need 3 of these 8-inch pans, and we're just going to evenly divide the batter between them as evenly as I can. And if you only have 2 pans, or if your oven only has enough room to bake 2 pans at one time, it is okay to let the third portion of batter sit on the counter while the other 2 cakes bake. If you want to bake this cake in 9-inch pans instead, that'll work just fine. You will need to reduce the baking time. I'd probably start checking at like 24 minutes. That would be my first guess off the top of my head. And of course your cake will just be a little bit shorter because your layers won't be as tall. Spread that batter just a little bit. And these are going to go into the center rack of our 350-degree Fahrenheit preheated oven. They are going to need to bake for about 30 minutes. Use a toothpick to test them. When they're finished baking, the toothpick should come out clean or with a few moist crumbs. So these cakes are going to need to cool in their pans for about 10 minutes. After they've cooled, you're going to want to take a knife and run it around the edge of the cakes just to loosen them from the pan. And then we'll carefully invert them onto our cooling rack to let them cool completely before we frost them. Thanks to these parchment paper liners, we should have absolutely no sticking. It takes a lot of stress out of baking that way. Now, if your cake's baked up kind of unevenly, you might want to consider leveling them before decorating them with your frosting. It'll make for a more even cake, but honestly, these usually bake so level for me that I don't really need to bother with it. So when your cakes are cooled and you're ready to prepare your frosting, you're going to want to pull your ricotta cheese out of the fridge. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a second, how yours should look. And you're also going to want to pull your mascarpone out of the fridge about 15 to 20 minutes before you begin. The thing with this cheese is if it gets too soft, it can be difficult to work with. And if it's too cold, it can be too difficult to work with. So both of these come out of the fridge 15 to 20 minutes before I'm ready to actually use them. All right, let's take a look at our ricotta. You can see here we've lost a lot of liquid, which is good. If that liquid were in here, our frosting would end up being just way too runny. So this cheese is way more thick now than it was yesterday. Just want to make sure you know what you're looking for here. So I'm going to go ahead and take this ricotta right over to my mixing bowl. Drop it right in. And we'll also add our mascarpone. And if you recall, we started with 16 ounces of ricotta. We have less weight than that now because we drained off the water, but that's what we're using. The ricotta we strained, and we're also adding 16 ounces of the mascarpone. And these 2 cheeses are going to give us that really distinct cannoli flavor. Like what we're basically making is cannoli filling, except we're putting it on the outside of the cake. I love this frosting. There's no butter in it. It's not too sweet. It's very easy to make so long as you handle your cheese properly. I think you're going to love it. All right, now grab your electric mixer and we are going to use this to stir together these 2 cheeses until they are smooth and creamy. Keep your mixer speed on low. You don't want to overmix this or you could end up actually breaking the mascarpone cheese. It'll separate and then you'll just kind of have a messy frosting on your hands. Let's take a look with our spatula. I want to mix until it's nice and smooth. All right, now we're going to gradually add our powdered sugar. You will need 4 cups of powdered sugar for this recipe, and I'll just add it a bit at a time, stirring on low speed. Try to keep the sugar from going everywhere. Not my greatest strength. About that last bit in there. There we go. We're almost completely combined. I'm going to pause right here and I will add our vanilla extract, which adds so much flavor to this. I'm using my homemade vanilla here. We're going to add a tablespoon of this. We're also going to add a pinch of salt. We'll add 1/4 teaspoon of table salt, which is going to really add a nice depth of flavor to the frosting. Stir these ingredients into the frosting. All right. I'm gonna stop there and I'll finish this with my spatula, making sure I'm scraping the sides and bottom of the bowl. And I almost forgot, I also like to add a 1/2 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, which really rounds out the flavor as well. Fold this in. All right, so if your cakes are cooled, your frosting's ready, you're ready to decorate your cake. One thing I want to talk about is I like to use mini chocolate chips to decorate this cake because that's how I like my cannolis, with some chocolate added. But if you prefer to use chopped pistachios instead, that would also work really well here. So I just have some chocolate chips measured out. Let's start decorating. Grab my cake platter. All right, now this is a softer frosting. That's normal. One thing I like to do is I'll scatter some chocolate chips over the frosting before I add my next layer. I'm going to work them in just a little bit. And our final layer. Now because this is a nice soft frosting, I like to do a crumb coating on it. I'll pop this in the freezer for about 10 or 15 minutes. The frosting will go in the refrigerator while it's waiting, and then I'll finish decorating the cake. And then we can continue decorating. All right, then I will take some more chocolate chips, and I like to decorate the top of the cake. I also like to press them up the side of the cake, but of course this is optional. Just a little chocolate chip mini skirt. Now I do want to recommend chilling this cake for at least 30 minutes before you cut into it. All right, after a brief stint in the fridge, let's go ahead and cut into this cake. As usual, I always get so nervous when I'm cutting into a cake on camera. This one's not as intricate as some of the cakes I've had to cut into recently. Oh yeah, that is a big slice. Great. Oh, I'm so excited to eat this. And that is how you make my favorite, my own invention, so I might be biased, but the perfect cannoli cake. If you try this one, leave me a comment, let me know what you think. I really do always love hearing from you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. It was a good cake. It's so good.